In her book, I believe it's called "The Grass is Always Greener Over the Septic Tank." Irma Bombeck talked about what happens, in many cases, to the suburban housewife. She says, if not careful, without finding meaning outside of housework, being a wife and raising children, a woman could possibly fade into the background of her family's life, losing all semblance of existence. She says, before long, you become like another part of the house, like the electric blender. Your children come home from school, look you straight in the eye, and ask if anyone is home. And you know, to be honest, I believe that a lot of times that very same thing can happen with us and our relationship with God. I think a lot of times we just kind of go through the motions with Him. We get up, we say our prayer, we maybe read something out of the Bible, not really seeing or expecting God to move or work in our life in any certain way. We just kind of roll with it, so to speak. And, you know, sometimes life gets busy, and not only does our lives get busy, but our lives seem to be so fast-paced. Jenny and I, we've been married for 22 years, and we had the conversation one time about our kids. And I was standing there, and I was talking to her, and it was just like the reality of my kids grown up just kind of hit me all at one time. And I said, it just doesn't make sense. I was here the whole time. But somewhere along the way, my kids grew up, and I don't remember when. I don't remember when it happened. I was here, but I don't remember how or when it happened. It just, maybe I'm the only one, but it just seems like time has a way of getting away from us. You know, you really don't even know it's happening at the time. You know, it just, you look back and all of a sudden it's just, where did it all go? And, you know, it doesn't seem like there's really enough hours in a day for many of us. And I know that a lot of our stories may be different, but I think in a lot of ways, many of us kind of feel hopeless and helpless. Life has kind of taken a turn that you didn't expect it to take. Things have happened in your lives that you never really thought were going to happen. You might find yourself in a position right now that you never expected to find yourself in. The circumstances, you never saw it coming. And then even wonder, is it ever going to get any better? Are things ever going to start looking up? You know, and today, we're going to look at a biblical account of a man who was going through a real tough time in his life. And he didn't really have any expectations of things getting any better. As a matter of fact, he only saw them getting worse. If you would, look at Luke chapter 5. We're going to read verses 12 through 16. And we're going to hear a story of a man who was, by all accounts, pretty helpless and pretty hopeless. It says, while he was in one of the towns, a man was there who had a serious skin disease all over him. He saw Jesus, fell face down, and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Reaching out his hand, he touched him, saying, I am willing, be made clean. And immediately the disease left him. Then he ordered him to tell no one, but go out and show yourself to the priest and offer what Moses prescribed for your cleansing as a testimony to them. But the news about him spread even more, and large crowds would come together to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. Yet he often withdrew and withdrew to deserted places and prayed. Here's the thing. I don't care if you've been a Christian for 5 minutes. I don't care if you've been a Christian for 5 years. I don't care if you've been a Christian for 50 years. There are times in each one of our lives where we feel like we have been totally separated from God. where we feel like our relationship with God is not where it should be. We've kind of lost our motivation. We've kind of lost our zeal and our excitement about serving God. And it's just kind of faded into the background. We know our relationship with God isn't where it used to be, but deep inside, we want to get it back to where it needs to be. But here's the bad part. In order for us to get our relationship back to where it needs to be with God, that's going to require us to do some things. I'm not saying you lost your salvation, but what I'm saying is when we find ourselves in a position to where our heart isn't where it needs to be with God, that's because what has changed in our relationship is us. It's the sin that we've allowed to come into our lives. And the reality of it is, many people don't like to face the sinfulness in their lives. Many times people don't like to face the fact that the reason why they're not as close to God as they once were is because of the things that we've allowed to come into our lives and separate us from God to begin with. And for us to look at those things and to face those things can be painful. And oftentimes, we don't want to do that. We would just rather continue with the way things are than have to face the hardness of our own heart. But here is the story of a man who really didn't do anything. He had this serious skin disease. And we're told that this man comes to Jesus. And the word leprosy was a term really used to describe really a wide range of serious skin diseases, and covered everything from psoriasis to really ringworm. To true leprosy today is called Hansen's disease. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but that's what it's called today. And with limited knowledge of the day, both curable and incurable diseases were called leprosy. It's just kind of what they put on it. They really didn't know what it was, but that's what they called it. And many people who had this disease, there was no hope of it ever getting any better. So here's the thing with leprosy. It begins to eat at your body, and eventually certain limbs will fall off. It begins to make you really not even look human. And what they did with people back in those days was if you had leprosy, it was just a known fact that you were going to be put in something called a leper's camp. And you were going to be totally separated from your friends. You were going to be separated from your family. You were not going to be able to have contact with anybody. All of that was going to be totally removed from you. So not only was this disease going to affect the way you looked, not only was it going to affect the way you appeared to people, but it was also going to affect you emotionally, because now the people that you love the most, the people that you spent the most time with, were going to be separated from you. And now you're not going to be able to even have contact with your friends or your family. And the thing of it was, to make matters worse, I guess you would say, to add insult to injury, if you were out in public and you had leprosy, you would have to shout at the top of your lungs when you were walking down the street, broadcasting the fact that you were a leper, so that people would stay completely away from you. Can you imagine the embarrassment and the humiliation that these people would have felt back in these times, to have to bring attention to it? Luke here gives us this account, and with his usual professional accuracy of a physician, he uses precise term that a man who came to Jesus was full of leprosy. He just didn't have a spot on his skin. This man was literally full of leprosy. His case was severe, and he had probably been a leper for a long time for it to have advanced to the state that it was in. And in Leviticus, leprosy is the most serious of all forms of uncleanliness. And such is the result of touching an unclean animal they were cleansed by waiting until evening and washing. That's what they would have to do. Other forms of uncleanliness was childbirth, but leprosy was much different. There was a lot of things that you could do back in the Old Testament times that would get you the stigmatism of being unclean. And there was always something that you could do in order to make yourself clean and presentable again. But that wasn't the case with leprosy. There was no cure. There was nothing that you could do to make yourself clean again. As a matter of fact, in Leviticus 13, verses 45 and 46, it says, the person afflicted with an infectious skin disease is to have his clothes torn, his hair hanging loose, and he must cover his mouth and cry out, unclean, unclean. He will remain unclean as long as he has the infection. He is unclean. He must live alone in a place outside of the camp. There's three things that we're going to look at here with this leper and with him turning to Jesus. And this leper is to dress like somebody who is in constant mourning. That's the outfit that he had to wear as somebody going to a burial service. And in reality, whose burial service was he really attending? His own. Because they knew that this is how it was going to end. And he had to constantly cry out wherever he went that he was unclean. And when we think of the turning of the leper, I want you to understand what an act of faith this really was for this man. What an act of faith that this truly was. And first of all, knowing what we know about lepers, he wasn't even supposed to be in town. He wasn't even supposed to be there. And look at verse 12 here in Luke 5. It says, while he was in one of the towns, a man was there who had a serious skin disease all over him. He saw Jesus, fell face down, and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. See, here's the thing. This leper wasn't even allowed to be in town. But here he was. What did he have to lose? I'm sure he's heard the stories about Jesus. The Bible tells us in most of the Gospels that word about the miracles that he was performing was traveling up around pretty quick. So here's this man full of leprosy. And he thinks, what do I have to lose? I'm going to go find this man who is performing all of these miracles. And if he is willing, just one touch from this man could heal me. Folks, how many people here this morning could use a fresh touch from God? I'm going to tell you something. I don't know why you're here. I don't know why you showed up this morning. But I can assure you that Jesus is here. And he wants to give you that fresh touch. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, whatever it is that you're dealing with in your life, that you think it's not going to get any better. I want you to understand, just one touch from Jesus can change everything. And he is here this morning. And he is ready, he is willing, and he is able to change your life. Maybe you've been a Christian for a long time and you need to rededicate your life to him. Maybe you've never truly came to Christ and repented of your sins. I'm going to tell you, whatever it is that you need, just one touch from God can change everything in your life. Here's this leprosy, a man full of leprosy, that has heard the stories about this man they call Jesus. And he knows that if I get just close enough and he touches me, what do you think, how long do you think, I guess I should say, that it has been since this man is now had this disease for a long time, had been touched by anybody? I would imagine it's been a very long time since this man had been touched by anybody. I would be willing to say that there was probably nobody in that town that would have been willing or brave enough to touch this man, because nobody else wanted leprosy, because they knew what was going to happen to them. But he knew. He knew. If I can just get one touch from this guy, things could be completely different. What did he have to lose? So he walked into town, risking the shame, the embarrassment, and really the pain of facing everybody. It's very hard to do that. It's very hard to do that. When your relationship isn't where it needs to be with God, it's really hard to face people. When we're in a backslidden state, when we're in a position to where we know we're about as far away as we could be from God, I'm going to tell you, one of the hardest things to do is to walk in to a place where you know that there's other Christians. Because you're ashamed, you're embarrassed. I want you to understand, this is a church. We've got this idea. We've got an idea in our head that church is for church people. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Church, this place, is for broken people. And each and every one of us is broken in one way or another. I think it's time we start acting like that. Whether you believe it or not, everybody in here is fighting a battle right now. Each and every one of us is broken in one way or another. We're no different from this man struggling with leprosy. We may not be struggling with leprosy, but we're struggling with something. And I'm telling you, a fresh touch from God can change everything. And notice, did this leper try to play games with God? Did he try to barter with him? If you do this, I'll do that. There was none of that. He wasn't playing games. He came by faith to Jesus, believing that this man can heal me. Believing that this man can make me whole. And what did he do as soon as he approached Jesus? Instantly, the Bible says he fell at his feet. He fell at Jesus' feet, and he said, Lord, if you will, if you can, make me whole. Listen, that's the answer to every problem that we have in life. Really, truly, honestly, that's the answer to every problem that we have in life. Only Christ can help us. Only Christ can save us